So when you break your arm, the X-ray shows like a really clean, jagged white line.
Right, it's undeniable.
Exactly. The doctor points at the glowing film, and you have your answer. It's broken. And the path to fixing it is obvious and universally agreed upon.
You put a cast on it, you wait, you heal.
Yeah, but what happens when you are just utterly exhausted? Like you can't sleep, you want to cry over dropping a spoon in the kitchen, and your routine medical tests all come back completely normal.
You're left in this incredibly isolating diagnostic limbo because your physical hardware is technically fine.
But your psychological software is basically crashing on a daily basis.
Exactly.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Today, we are exploring that exact crash. We're looking into the quiet, often ignored signals our minds send us when they're just fundamentally overwhelmed.
And we're also looking at how the landscape of mental health care is finally adapting to meet us where we are.
Right, so our source material today is this focus briefing from a telehealth therapy practice based in Georgia. They're called Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC.
It's a really fascinating document.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to help you, the listener, decode the subtle difference between, just having a standard long week and experiencing what we call functional exhaustion.
Which is such a crucial distinction. We're also going to map out exactly how accessible modern support systems have actually become for this specific issue.
Okay, let's unpack this because reading through this material was so validating. It describes exactly how so many of us feel on a daily basis.
Yeah, it bypasses those dramatic, cinematic versions of burnout we usually see on TV.
Right, you don't have to be screaming into a pillow to be burnt out. The source outlines 5 very specific, quiet signs that your mind needs support. And we really need to walk through all 5.
Let's do it.
So the first sign is kind of a paradox. It's that you are always tired, even after a full night's sleep.
Right, and this is where we have to separate just the concept of unconsciousness from the biological process of restorative sleep.
Well, that's interesting. What's the difference?
Well, if you are functionally exhausted, your brain is likely operating in sympathetic nervous system dominance. That's your classic fight or flight mode.
So your body thinks it's in danger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your hypothalamus is constantly signaling your adrenal glands to pump out cortisol because your brain perceives your environment, like your overflowing inbox or financial stress, as an active physical threat.
It's treating an email like a tiger in the room.
Yes. So you lie down, you close your eyes, and you might even fall asleep. But neurologically speaking, you are trapped in a state of hyperarousal.
Meaning your brain is essentially sleeping with one eye open.
Precisely. Because it believes there is a predator nearby, it prevents your body from dropping into the deepest stages of slow-wave sleep.
And that's the sleep we actually need, right?
Right. Slow-wave sleep is when your body repairs tissue and your brain clears out metabolic waste. If you aren't hitting those deep cycles, you wake up exhausted.
Because biologically, you just work the night shift doing security detail for your own nervous system.
That is a perfect way to put it.
Wow. And because you're waking up operating on that severe neurological deficit, your behavioral filter just completely collapses. Which brings us to the second sign.
That little things feel huge, the emotional reactivity.
Yeah, like you handle a high-stakes presentation at work with total composure, but then later that evening you drop a pen or someone cuts you off in traffic and you are suddenly fighting back tears.
That disproportionate reaction illustrates a reduced allostatic load capacity.
Allostatic load.
Yeah, allostasis is your body's process of maintaining a stability through change. It's basically how you manage stress. But your brain only has a finite amount of metabolic energy for emotional regulation.
So there's a literal energy budget for keeping calm.
Exactly. And the part of your brain responsible for hitting the emotional brakes, the prefrontal cortex, is incredibly energy hungry.
Oh, I see. So if you're stuck in that hyper-aroused state and missing deep sleep from sign 1, your prefrontal cortex is basically starved of fuel.
Yes. And meanwhile, your amygdala, which is the emotion and fear center, is highly reactive.
So when you drop that pen,
Your prefrontal cortex just doesn't have the fuel to contextualize the event and say, hey, it's just a pen. The brakes are completely offline.
so the amygdala just hits the gas.
Right. And you experience a 10 out of 10 emotional response to a 1 out of 10 stressor. It's never actually about the pen. It's about a totally depleted regulatory system.
That makes so much sense. To me, it feels a lot like a smartphone running way too many background apps.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. Like you look at the screen and it looks completely normal, But the battery is just draining instantly because of all the invisible work happening.
Exactly. You look functional, but the battery is dying.
Which perfectly sets up the third sign in the CHC text. You're saying, I'm fine,
Oh,
far more often than you actually are fine. But, I mean, I have to push back on this one a little bit.
okay, let's hear it.
Isn't it just modern life? I mean, how do we know when saying I'm fine crosses the line from a polite reflex into a subtle nervous system signal? Like, if a cashier asks how I am, I'm not going to unload my trauma on them.
No, of course not. Saying I'm fine is a necessary social script. That's just how civilization functions.
Right. So where's the danger?
What's fascinating here is how CHC frames it. The clinical danger doesn't come from telling the cashier you're fine. The danger arises from the cognitive dissonance of internalizing that mask constantly. It requires an immense amount of active psychological energy to constantly maintain a mismatch between your internal reality and your external expression.
So you're spending precious energy just to suppress the exhaustion, which then just makes you more exhausted.
Exactly, creates this vicious feedback loop. And when I'm fine shifts from a polite interaction with a stranger to a wall you build between yourself and your spouse or your friends. It becomes a mechanism of profound isolation.
You're masking so effectively that no one even knows to offer you help.
Right, and worse, you convince yourself you don't deserve help anyway because on paper you're functioning.
Wow. Okay, which leads directly to the fourth sign.
Mhm.
Your thoughts simply will not stop at night. It's that classic 2 in the morning rumination loop.
Oh, the dreaded 2 a.m. wake up.
Yeah. During the day, you can maintain the I'm fine mask because you have a million distractions. Work, podcasts, commuting.
You're forcing your brain to stay engaged in the task-positive network.
But at night, all those external stimuli just vanish.
Right, and when you lie in the dark without a task to focus on, your brain naturally switches over to the default mode network, or the DMN.
And the DMN is normally a good thing.
In a healthy system, yes. It's incredibly useful. It's where we consolidate memories, where we daydream and do long-term planning.
But what happens in a functionally exhausted system?
In an exhausted system, the DMN basically becomes an anxiety engine because you've spent the entire day suppressing your stress responses to maintain that functional exterior.
The DMN seizes the quiet moment.
Exactly. It brings every unprocessed threat right to the forefront of your consciousness. Your brain is desperately trying to solve problems it didn't have the bandwidth to process at noon.
So that nighttime rumination isn't necessarily a sleep disorder. It's a massive processing backlog demanding your attention.
That is exactly what it is.
Which brings us to the fifth and final quiet sign. And this one just feels like the devastating conclusion to this whole cascade. Joy feels far away or dimmed.
Anhedonia.
Right. It's not necessarily that you are actively weeping all the time. It's just that the things that used to light you up, like a hobby or a favorite song, they feel muted. Like the color saturation has been dialed down to gray.
I often think about this in terms of a city's power grid during a massive heat wave.
Oh, how so?
When the electrical demand gets too high, the city doesn't just let the entire grid explode. It initiates targeted rolling blackouts. It shuts down power to certain neighborhoods to ensure the core infrastructure stays online.
The core infrastructure, like hospitals and water pumps, that is a brilliant way to look at it. So your nervous system is initiating an emotional rolling blackout.
Exactly. Your brain recognizes that you are chronically overwhelmed. So to keep your core survival functions online, like paying bills, feeding your kids, doing your job, it has to conserve energy somewhere else.
And experiencing joy takes a lot of energy.
It really does. High resonance emotions like joy, awe, and deep presence require tremendous neurological energy. So your nervous system downregulates those capacities just to keep you walking and talking.
Because you can't selectively numb emotion. If your brain is dialing down the grid to numb the chronic stress, it inevitably darkens the neighborhoods where joy and connection live too.
Right. And notice how CHC frames all of this in their briefing. They explicitly state that experiencing these 5 signs does not mean something is fundamentally wrong with you.
Which is so refreshing. They treat these symptoms not as a character flaw, but as your biology working exactly as it's designed to. Your nervous system is just sending warning lights to the dashboard.
Which is a profound pivot. It completely removes the shame from functional exhaustion.
It really does. But recognizing the warning lights brings us to the next massive hurdle in the source material. What stops highly functional people from actually getting help?
Right. And CHC points directly to the myth of the diagnosis.
The deeply ingrained societal belief that therapy is reserved solely for emergencies. We have this idea that you need a severe, categorized mental illness to earn the right to sit in a therapist's office.
Like you need a DSM-5 diagnosis just to walk through the door.
Exactly. And think about how absurd this is when applied to literally anything else. Like, if you notice a hairline crack in the foundation of your house, you don't wait for the roof to cave into the living room before calling a structural engineer.
Right, you fix it while the house is still standing.
But with mental health, we often wait for a total breakdown.
We fetishize resilience to the point where we wait for the collapse. But the CHC model specifically targets this pre-crisis window.
They emphasize that therapy is for before things get harder.
Yes. It's highly effective for the person who is still holding it together, but doing so at an unsustainable cost.
The briefing explicitly states, you don't need a diagnosis to deserve care. The only requirement is the willingness to say, I'd like to feel more like myself again.
And that specific phrase, feel more like myself again, is so important. It's a quiet rejection of the hyper-medicalized model of mental health.
Because it doesn't frame you as a patient who needs a cure.
Exactly. It frames the therapeutic process as restorative. It's about finding your baseline. It validates that the vibrant, energetic person you used to be hasn't vanished.
They're just buried under an accumulated allostatic load.
You got it.
Okay, so let's say a listener hears this. They recognize the rolling blackouts in their own life, and they accept that they deserve to fix the foundation before the house collapses.
The pre-crisis intervention.
Right. But the moment they decide to get help, they hit a brick wall of logistics. The friction of actually acquiring care is notorious.
It is, and this is where the CHC briefing shifts from psychology to operations. They outline a model designed to erase that friction entirely.
Right. The telehealth revolution.
Yeah, they utilize a 100% telehealth IPA-compliant model serving all 159 counties in Georgia.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here regarding telehealth for a second.
Go for it.
If I am in that state of functional exhaustion, if I'm experiencing sign number 5, where I feel disconnected and my joy is dimmed, logging into yet another video call feels like the absolute last thing I want to do.
Screen fatigue is real.
Yeah, if my eyes are burning from staring at spreadsheets and Zoom meetings all day, how is staring at a screen therapeutic? Doesn't a screen make it harder to connect? Why is telehealth the right answer here?
It's a highly valid concern, but we have to weigh the cost of the screen against the transition cost of traditional in-person therapy.
Transition cost.
Yeah, a commute is not just lost time, it is a series of micro-stressors. You have to leave work early, navigate Atlanta traffic, or drive an hour across a rural county.
You have to find parking, sit in a waiting room.
Anticipating a very vulnerable conversation, you are spending energy you literally don't have before the session even begins.
Okay, so the transition cost is just insurmountable for a nervous system operating at 1% battery.
Exactly. Telehealth eliminates that specific allostatic load. You can close your work laptop, take 3 deep breaths in your own living room, and immediately enter a controlled therapeutic environment.
Without rearranging your life to do it.
Right. And honestly, the physical safety of your own space often allows patients to drop that "I'm fine" mask much faster than they would in a clinical office.
That makes total sense.
Mhm.
And the briefing also highlights how this digital infrastructure solves the geographic bottleneck.
It really does. They employ a culturally competent team of over 15 licensed therapists.
And they list out the credentials, LCSWs, LPCs, LMFTs. For those who aren't familiar with the alphabet soup of clinical care, that's licensed clinical social workers, licensed professional counselors, and licensed marriage and family therapists.
That variety is crucial, because if you live in a rural or underserved county in Georgia, your in-person options might be limited to just a single general practitioner.
Right. But by operating a statewide telehealth network, your zip code no longer dictates the specificity of your care.
Exactly. If you need someone who specializes in trauma or PTSD, or someone who shares your cultural background,
Or someone who does team therapy, since they treat ages 13 and up.
right. A clinic like CHC can match you with the exact right practitioner from their roster, even from a distance.
And they cover a massive spectrum. Individual, couples, family, teen therapy, and life coaching. Their specialties map perfectly onto the functional exhaustion we've been discussing. Anxiety, depression, grief, relationships, and chronic stress.
It's comprehensive, highly specialized care without the geographical friction. But, removing physical barriers only matters if you also remove the financial ones.
The absolute ultimate barrier.
Oh, yeah.
You can have the best telehealth platform in the world, but if it costs $200 out of pocket per hour, it remains an elite luxury.
Completely inaccessible for the average person.
Right. And this is where the CHC briefing moves from conceptually impressive to practically revolutionary. They outline their financial reality, and it fundamentally changes the math of seeking help.
Well, they start by noting a $0 copay for Medicaid patients.
$0, that is huge. And for commercial insurance, they accept the major networks Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, and Humana.
By navigating the notoriously complex credentialing process for all those providers, CHC drives typical out-of-pocket session costs down to between $10 and $40.
$10 to $40. I mean, let's just contextualize those numbers for a second.
Please do.
That is the cost of a few cups of coffee. It's the price of one moderately priced takeout order on a Tuesday night because you are too exhausted to cook.
Exactly. Functionally exhausted people are already spending that exact amount of money on temporary coping mechanisms just to get through the week.
So true.
What a clinic like CHC is doing by accepting Medicaid and these broad commercial networks is transforming mental health care from a luxury into a predictable, manageable utility.
It democratizes it.
It does. Financial stress is one of the primary drivers of sympathetic nervous system dominance. If the act of getting therapy causes financial panic, it triggers the exact cortisol response the therapy is trying to treat.
It's a paradoxical intervention. By keeping the cost equivalent to a takeout order, they put their money where their mouth is.
They're proving their commitment to the idea that you don't need a diagnosis to deserve care, because they are making that care practically attainable.
For the average person in Georgia, speaking of which, for those who want to explore this further, their contact information is super straightforward. The website is chuaheactherapy.com, and their intake line is 4A-832-0102. I'll repeat that later, too.
It's just a complete ecosystem of accessibility. They validate the symptoms, they remove the stigma, they erase the commute, and they neutralize the financial panic.
They really do. So, just briefly recapping our journey through this deep dive, we started by looking past the X-ray machine and into the murky reality of functional exhaustion.
Unpacking the neurology behind those 5 quiet signs.
Right. How hyperarousal ruins our sleep. How a starved prefrontal cortex makes us overreact to little things. The immense energy cost of maintaining the I'm fine mask.
How the default mode network weaponizes our suppressed anxieties at night.
Yeah, and how our nervous system initiates those rolling emotional blackouts that dim our joy.
And we also examine the vital importance of pre-crisis intervention, fixing the foundation before the collapse.
Exactly. And we saw how modern models, specifically coping and healing counseling, use telehealth and accessible pricing to make that restorative care possible for an entire state.
They prove that feeling like yourself again doesn't have to require rearranging your entire life.
Or draining your bank account. Again, you can reach them at 404-832-0102 or at chiseltherapy.com or support@chiseltherapy.com.
It fundamentally changes how we view maintenance and care.
It does. But as we wrap up, I want to return to something we touched on earlier because it's just been echoing in my mind.
What's that?
It's that idea of the rolling blackouts and joy feeling far away. We spend so much of our lives measuring our health by our ability to function.
Yeah.
Like, can I work? Can I pay my taxes? Can I keep the house clean?
Right. And if the answer is yes, we assume we are healthy. We view functioning as the ceiling rather than the floor.
Exactly. But if our modern society has normalized this state of functional exhaustion as the default human condition, what would happen if we radically shifted our metrics?
That is a great question.
What if we started treating the active pursuit of joy, not just the absence of a breakdown, but actual resonant joy, not as an occasional luxury, but as an essential metric of our baseline health?
Wow.
What would your life look like next week if you finally stopped settling for, I'm fine, something to mull over?